Hello, greetings everyone. So, in the second session, we ended at arguments for restricting trade. Now, moving on to the arguments which are in favor of trade. So, not all arguments would be, for restricted trade. Some of the ones could be in favor of trade as well. So, first, favor for restricting trade. So, see, we saw till now, we saw all the advantages of international trade. Now, we are seeing restricting trade and why we should restrict trade. This is like almost against what we just studied till now, that international trade is beneficial, advantages, all that. This is disadvantages of international trade. मतलब trade क्यों restrict होना चाहिए और trade क्यों नहीं होना चाहिए. This is what we will be talking about in this. So the first argument is an infant industry. So what do you mean by infant industry? Infant industry is a small industry which is a growing industry. एकदम से grow नहीं हुआ, halfway है, slowly steadily develop हो रहा है, एकदम से develop नहीं हुआ. Now what would happen is अगर इंटरनेशनल कंपनीज आ गए मार्केट में तो वो इंडस्ट्री को डेवलप करने का चांस ही नहीं मिलेगा. कंपटीशन इतना टफ हो जाएगा कि इंडस्ट्री वुड रन आउट ऑफ मनी, रन आउट ऑफ बिजनेस. So here I just have mentioned an example of e-commerce. So the e-commerce example is like, let's say India had Flipkart for that matter of fact. These small e-commerce चल रहा था. Now let's say Amazon आता है, तो foreign companies आ गए. So what happens is वो उसको इंडियन कंपनी इंडियन ई कॉमर्स को डेवलप करने का चांस ही नहीं मिला. सब फॉरेन कंपनीज आके they just took over the business. Some other example would be, let's say, EV cars. So I can also write here EV. Currently only Tata Motors is producing EV. Mahindra is also producing EV. अभी developing है, grow हो रहा है. Indians are buying. Slowly, steadily develop हो रहा है. Now, let's say India starts importing Tesla all of a sudden. What would happen is all the rich individuals would buy Tesla. Status symbol है, Elon Musk and everything. So what would happen is Tata Motors के लिए it would be a huge loss. It's just on a growing stage, and suddenly grow stage करते करते it was just since foreign competition has entered, Tesla could also sell products at a cheaper rate. Let's say एकदम सस्ते में cars बेचना चालू कर दिया. So even middle class people are buying. So Tata Motors is run out of this. This happened, you might already know, cheaper price पे sell करना. This happened in case of our telecom industry where Reliance Jio entered in the market, uh, gave free products to everyone, free telecom services to everyone. Lot of people switched from Airtel and Vodafone to Jio, and then again started charging prices, and now people are just gotten used to with Jio. Now let's say just an example of this. Let's say if a foreign company enters and starts giving out all the services and free, everyone would again buy that. This would lead to loss of Indian industry. So yeah, infant industry could suffer because of this. To reduce reliance on goods with little dynamic potential. So what does that mean is, in case there are other products, like let's say India imports a lot of other products, lot of other luxury goods, lot of luxury services. So we, rather than importing all that thing, rather than using our Indian money to buy all those things which has very little potential, very little market. So rather just stop the trade, stop importing all those stuff, and stay focused on Indian goods rather than importing useless. This basically means importing useless goods. So why should we import that? Why should we use our Indian currency? Why should we buy more dollars and just give out more dollars as a part of imports? Like we mentioned, index of imports, index of exports upon index of imports is the terms of trade index. So we should focus on improving our terms of trade index rather than spending useless money for needless imports. To prevent dumping and unfair trade practices. So now let's say if a country like USA comes and starts making goods in country, let's say like Africa for that matter of fact, or some small underdeveloped countries like Asia. So what would happen is it would just exploit the natural resources of that particular country. So this would ideally, what does it mean is this would not be that much beneficial for Africa as such. So basically stronger countries and stronger companies exploiting weaker countries and weaker companies to prevent establishment of a foreign-based monopoly. Taking an example of that is would be, let's say, simple example could be any food item for that matter of fact. Let's say just take an example of McDonald's. So now
it's not a monopoly as such, but yeah, McDonald's, Burger King could be an example. So, like anyone wants French fries, it would just go to McDonald's. It's not the case, just a hypothetical example. So, here in this case, a foreign company has come to India and established a monopoly. So, Indian government would never want that, never want a foreign company dominating or exploiting the Indian citizens because it can charge any price. Again, because of exchange rate and everything, again, because of higher profits, it can charge any price. And India does not, in any government would not want कि foreign company आके यहाँ पे monopoly create करे. It could be there. Competition economy होगा, there would be competition. That is fine because Indian companies भी होंगे, Indian versus foreign companies, lot of products, lot of choices, everything. But just one company exploiting that could be a bit, not fair for consumers. The next would be prevent spreading risks of fluctuating markets. So now here I will just take an example of banks for that matter of fact, because just yeah, banks. So now foreign banks come to India as well, establish reputation, start giving out services, credit cards, start investing in our Indian markets, derivative positions, everything. There's a lot of other financial things that I'm including. But yeah, so let's say if a foreign bank comes to India, establishes the whole business. Now, because of recession, 2007 recession, yeah, or कोई recession के कारण वो foreign bank got bankrupt. So what will happen is all of a sudden bankrupt हो गई US में, so it will just close operations, shut operations all across India, and just exit India. So जो भी existing jobs रहेंगे, जो भी existing work culture, salaries, buildings, whatever assets of that company, everything would be sold and company would just leave India all of a sudden, leading to a very high risk of unemployment. So any kind of global market में turmoil आता है, global market में recession आता है, it would impact India more and more if it is dependent on international trades, if it is dependent on international companies. For this, I just give an example of banks. In recession आया, कुछ भी एक बैंक को problem हुआ, that bank is in India as well, so India को भी problem होगा. Indian economy would also suffer because of that. Reduce the influence of trade on consumer tastes. So some countries are very religious based or very old fashioned based. They won't want their people to follow Western culture or foreign culture. So that's why they would restrict it. As simple as that. To prevent import of harmful goods, like import of imported alcohol, imported cigarettes, drugs, and all that stuff. Take into account externalities. So the externalities part would be covered in another chapter, but externalities for now, I'm just explaining it to you in a simple terms. It's basically effect on environment. So it's just basically the concern with global warming and other impact on basically India's natural resources and natural environment. So there can be an example like India is importing crude or something like that from shipping. So because of that, let's say if the oil gets spilled, so in the Arabian Sea, so there can be impact on India's natural resources. Let's say if India is importing more and more cigarettes or more and more trucks, or let's say trucks or any other normal vehicles which emit more and more carbon dioxide. So all this stuff would basically have a harm on the people only. कि ऐसे products जिससे welfare नहीं हो रहा है, harm ज्यादा हो रहा है. So if those products are, you can take any example for that matter कि ऐसे products अगर import हो रहा है जिससे harm ज्यादा हो रहा है, negative impact ज्यादा हो रहा है rather than positive. So those are basically externalities. So yes, so for all these are the reasons कि country को trade restrict करना चाहिए, country को close करना चाहिए. These are all the reasons. But definitely these are the just the disadvantages. Advantages are much more higher than the disadvantages. That's why international trade happens. It's not like it's stopped. Again, this question could come in your exam. Now, moving on to problems with protection. Now, again, the previous slide में what did we study? The government ने protect किया, and why government should protect? कि trade ban कर दो, international trade stop कर दो. These are the positives in that favor. Now again we'll move on to the negatives. की protection नहीं होना चाहिए. Government should not protect small industries. Government should just open up, allow international trade. So these are the points which are in favor of it.
The first point is cost of protection. That is a difficult one. We will just, it's there in the next slide. I'll just cover it in the next five or 10 minutes. We'll move on to the other points like reduced choices. So let's say if the government does not allow imports, the McDonald's and Burger King and so what would India have? Choices नहीं बचेगी. India would just be eating vada pav. So this is just an example. So foreign companies, more and more the foreign companies would come, the more and more options would India have in terms, more and more options would consumers have. If there is no international trade, very less options. Protection as the second best. So protection would be just the second best option to solve certain problems. Rather, see, so the argument, if you remember, the protection of an infant industry or a small industry or an industry that is making losses. So government can choose to decide कि हाँ हमें इसको protect करना है या if we open up trade then the industry would just stop. So here let me just give you an example of it's not an industry example, it's a company based example. Yeah. So the famous example of Air India. So yes, so government tried to protect Air India for several years. There are international flight companies as well operating in India, but government tried to protect the industry because Air India was making losses. Government was hopeful कि कभी ना कभी ये profit होगा, थोड़ा protect करते हैं, थोड़ा cheap देते हैं. Lots of things government tried. But at the end of the result, protection is just the second number option. अगर industry worst performing है, अगर बकवास है, there is no other way. Just let it go. Government for Air India, it went down to Tata's, and probably Tata's bought Air India. So now there is probably chance कि आगे जाके improve हो सकता है. Yeah, another better example for this, you can ask your parents, ask your grandparents. In India, in before I guess I'm not sure before 1990 or before 2000 something, there was only one company, one telecom company, MTNL, BSNL, government owned. बाकी कोई भी company नहीं था. एक टेलीफोन की लाइन को अप्लाई करने के लिए it would take years and years of waiting list. Both the companies were way too slow, एकदम bureaucracy, एकदम बकवास work, operationality बकवास. After then, Airtel came in, Vodafone is a foreign company again. Vodafone came in, all those companies came in, Idea came in. So now what happened is MTNL is out of business. If you look at MTNL का share price, it is I guess less than 20 or almost close होने पे ही आ गया है. No one uses MTNL now. So it's a government company, but government decided नहीं अभी protect नहीं करना है because it was not at all performing well. Let it go. Foreign companies came in, efficiency bada, and at the end of the result, we as consumers got benefit. Retaliation. So retaliation, what happens is, let's say if कल उठ के India and China का बहुत सारा issues चल रहा है. Let's say if India bans imports from China, what would happen is China would also retaliate. Like तूने किया तो मैं भी करूंगा. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So China would also ban all the imports from India. So now India would ban क्या let's say China से क्या import होता है, firecrackers import होते हैं, ये import होता है, it would ban, सीधा ban ना. Now what we are doing is slowly reduce करो, focus on Indian goods का प्रचार करो, but still China से import कर ही रहे हैं हम लोग. We have not stopped. But अगर straightforward ban in the sense zero, 100 से सीधा zero, we are starting to reduce 100 से let's say 90%, 80%, 70%. That's what we are doing. But अगर 100 से सीधा zero होता है, what would China do? It would in return it would also ban all the imports from India. India का import करता रहेगा शायद agricultural goods, mangoes और भी बहुत सारे फार्मास्यूटिकल चीज है import export करता रहेगा चाइना को, वो सब भी बैन हो जाएगा. So एक साइड से बेनिफिट मिला, लेट्स से फायर क्रैकर्स और ये सब इंपोर्ट करना बंद हो गया, इंडियन कंपनीज को बेनिफिट मिला, तो एक्सपोर्ट भी कम हो जाएंगे सामने. सो ऑल द अदर कंपनीज एक्सपोर्टिंग कंपनीज वुड सफर. सो बेसिकली इट वुड nullify each other. So that could be the case again. So you should not ban trade. That's the main motivation. Bureaucracy. So yeah, like I mentioned, MTNL का example, government company, एक दो ही company है, lot of bureaucracy, lot of internal गोलमाल. There is no one to see, just a monopoly company. It would just exploit its customers. So that should not happen. पर जितना competition ज़्यादा रहेगा, उतना transparency ज़्यादा रहेगा, उतना efficiency ज़्यादा रहेगा, consumers को benefit. And firms could still remain inefficient. So even after all those saving, all the bachao, company ko bachao, after some time they are still inefficient. They still cannot come out of their zone. So rather than doing that, just let it go, just let it become bankrupt, whatever. Let foreign companies come in, efficiency रहेगा, cheap भी हो सकता है.
because current companies तो ऐसे ही perform नहीं कर रही है, losses ही कर रही है, आगे जाकर price और rise करेगी. So let other companies come in, let other companies be there, competition बढ़ेगा and consumers will benefit. So these are like hold on, I'll just close this. Yes. So these are some of the problems with protection. So if government decides to protect a particular industry or a particular company, let's say ये industry में zero imports, सिर्फ domestic supply चाहिए, ban कर दो imports की industry में, ये segment में. So these are the negative points, disadvantages with that particular protection. Now moving on to costs of protection, which was the first point that is there. I like I mentioned, it's there in the next slide. Just hold on. I just pause this for a few minutes. Yeah, it is. Sure. Yeah, where were we? Yes. So the cost of production, I'll just open the whiteboard. I'm not sure how to do that. No. Okay. Yeah. So here with the problems of protection, the cost of protection, there is this graph. So that's why I just open the whiteboard just to better, depict the graph. Yeah. So starting with the graph, what I'll do is I'll just make the graph on the spot. So this will just give you an idea how the graph is being made. The Here we have price, here we have quantity. This is a normal demand supply graph, which you might have seen in chapter 2 as well. So hold on. Let me change the color. How should I change that? Yes. So making the demand curve. Since we all know demand is downward sloping curve. So yes, this is the demand curve, and this would be the supply curve. You might have seen this in chapter 2. Yeah, they are coinciding at this particular point. Now, what happens is earlier, see, here we just take that assumption that it is a perfectly competitive home market and the product is imported and produced locally as well. Domestic supply and demand, I just show you what domestic supply and demand are. And the country also imports the little of the product. So it is a price taker. Again, you might have seen this in chapter 6 or 7, monopolistic competition. It is the price taker in the sense to even after so many of imports, country cannot impact the price. So now here we'll just take an example or that the previous price is at this level. Okay, I'll just make a line out here. This is PW, price at world price. Basically, this is just the world price. So earlier the price was this. The world, let's say simple example, iPhone का price $1,000 throughout the world. ये price था. So now ये price पे we'll just see कि कितना demand कितना supply ये price पे आ सकता है. So I just draw this line out here. This is Q1. We'll label it as Q1. Okay. And since this is a supply graph, you might already know supply graph, supply domestic, as we might say. And this you all know the blue line is demand domestic, but still I'll just write it so that there is no confusion. Demand domestic. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So if price is PW, then what would happen is supply would be Q1. Okay, is this clear? If price is PW, the supply would be Q1 as it is intersecting at this point. What would be the demand? It would be Q2.
So here take an example, $1,000 में iPhone मिल रहा है, $1,000 मतलब 80,000, 80,000 rupees में iPhone मिल रहा है. So everyone would buy it. So much demand in India. 80,000 is cheap. Generally 1 लाख के ऊपर होता है, but 80,000 is cheap. So supply is very less since we are importing, and demand is very high. Q1 और Q2 के बीच में difference देखिए. Okay. So before protection, what happens is अभी कुछ भी protection नहीं है. अभी PWE price चल रहा है. So before protection, I just write here before. Before would mean before protection. Before protection, how much import we will do? IMP import would be Q3 minus Q1. Q3, Q2. Sorry, here I'll just take Q2. So it's Q2 minus Q1. इतना import करना पड़ रहा है. S का line C, it's supply domestic. D का line is demand domestic. So here supply domestic in the sense we are assuming कि थोड़ा सा iPhone इंडिया में भी मैन्युफैक्चर होता है और इंडिया में इतना सप्लाई होता है, Q1 जितना इंडिया में सप्लाई होता है. But because its demand price is 80,000, here we have another there is an assumption कि world price और इंडिया का प्राइस सेम है. इंडिया कैन नॉट अफेक्ट वर्ल्ड प्राइस. दैट्स व्हाई इंडिया में और फॉरेन में प्राइसेस आर सेम, 80,000 ही है. तो इसलिए इंडिया में सप्लाई है Q1, इंडिया में डिमांड है Q2. इंपोर्ट करना पड़ेगा कितना? All this distance between Q1 and Q2 needs to be imported. This distance, this are the total imports. Now we will look at consumer welfare. So again, this would be covered this has been covered in the previous sessions. If you are looking this video first, since this video I am just making it as a demo video, so that's why this concepts might not be that much familiar to you. So probably you can just rewatch it once you are done with all the other chapters as well, once you have seen all other chapter video as well. So here we would now move on to what did I mention? Welfare before protection. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll start marking some of the, now I'm short of colors, but I'll just start marking these areas. I'll mark this A, I'll mark this B. I'll explain to you what each of these areas surely means. But yeah, I'll mark this one as okay. Hold on, let me just fill up this. I'll just first thing what I'll do is I'll just explain the whole graph completely and then start with the marks. So now what would happen is India is importing this much goods. Now India is starting to put tariffs. Like we discussed, what are the tariffs of import? कि आईफोन पहले 80,000 का मिलता है यूएस में. यूएस से बाय किया, यूएस से कोई अगर फ्लाइट में तुम्हारा रिलेटिव लेके आया तो 80,000 का मिलेगा. बट अगर तुम यूएस से इंडिया इंपोर्ट करते हो और फिर इंडिया से तुम लेते हो तो वो 1,10,000 का हो सकता है. व्हाट्स दैट डिफरेंस इज द टैरिफ चार्ज बाय द गवर्नमेंट. So let's say now the government charges this much of the, now let's say this much of the price is charged. Okay, hold on. Undo. Yeah. Why is this color not picking up? Okay, I need to change it to pen. Yeah. So let's say now the price has been increased to this range. So this was the supply. Matlab, I'll just label it out here. This was the price. This was the world price. What do we say? Constant throughout the world. This is world plus tariff. World plus tariff. So अभी प्राइस इंक्रीज होगा मतलब गवर्नमेंट उतना टैक्सेस चार्ज कर रहा है, कस्टम ड्यूटीज चार्ज कर रहा है, व्हाटएवर गवर्नमेंट इज चार्ज, बट प्राइस हैज बीन इंक्रीज. Now I was mentioning about labeling it to you, so now it is better that like and I'll be able to label the areas. So whatever different areas are there, I'll just start labeling each of these. This would be A, this small region is B, this is C, this region I would label it as P. Hold on, there is E and F as well. I'll explain it to you where did this come from. And there is G. Change the color. Now, since price has increased, what has happened is supply price we already know price increase hota hai to supply increase hota hai. It has a positive relation because higher price would encourage कि ज्यादा price है तो बहुत सारे suppliers आएंगे, they start manufacturing more, supply ज्यादा होगा. So this we have seen it in chapter 2, but yeah. So after an increase in price, supply would increase, making the quantity. Okay, I should have used orange, or I'm short of colors now. But yeah, you can just understand this. Yes, I'll just highlight it because this is after increase in tariff. I'll just mark this as Q3 now. And demand, domestic demand. Because price का increase, we know price increase का demand कम होता है. 1 लाख में सब लोग iPhone नहीं लेंगे, 80,000 में बहुत लोग लेंगे. So this is the updated quantity demanded. So Q3 is the quantity supplied and Q4 is the quantity demand. Now, what we can see here is imports would be just between this range. You can see the arrow earlier, it was Q2 minus Q1. Now it is imports are Q4 minus Q3. This is Q in the sense is quantity. Quantity कितने में रहेगा? 10,000 में रहेगा, लाख में रहेगा, 1 लाख आईफोन, 2 लाख आईफोन ऐसे. Assume Q1 is 1 lakh, Q3 is 2 lakh, Q4 is 3 lakh, Q2 is 4 lakh. So पहले 4 lakh minus 1 lakh 3 lakh import होते थे. अभी सिर्फ 3 lakh minus 2 lakh 1 lakh import होते हैं. So after an increase in tariff, what we can see is the total imports have fallen. So this quantity I'll just mention, let's say it's in 1 crore, 1 lakh, lakh बराबर है iPhone के लिए crore नहीं. 1 lakh units, okay, 1 lakh units. Q1 is 1 lakh, Q3 is 2 lakh. ये 1 लाख है, ये 2 लाख है, ये 3 लाख है, ये 4 लाख है. पहले इंपोर्ट हो रहा था 4 लाख माइनस 1 लाख, 3 लाख का इंपोर्ट था. अभी 3 लाख माइनस 2 लाख, 1 लाख का ही इंपोर्ट है. So after increase in tariffs, the imports have fallen significantly. So this was the main. Now we would see look at welfare. So I'll just rub this out, rub this other stuff out. This was with regards to quantity. Yeah? Okay, hold on. Moment. It's a bit tedious to rub everything out. Yes, rubbed it. Okay. Now we will look at welfare before protection. So what would that mean is, I'll just show you. We have just highlighted this ABCD now. So this is with regards to welfare. This is welfare. Now we will look at before. Okay. Total surplus. You would see total surplus. You might have seen it in the previous chapters as well. Total surplus would be पहले था supply, पहले सी, पहले this was the range I am highlighting and this was the range. Okay, ये बीच में सब कुछ in था. So the total consumer surplus would be A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F. मतलब क्या हुआ? डिमांड इतना है, डिमांड फ्लो के अंदर इतना सारा है. एंड what is happening is ये price if we compare, see compare these two lines, डिमांड डोमेस्टिक का लाइन कंपेयर करो और ये प्राइस का लाइन कंपेयर. तो कंपेयर दीज टू लाइंस. ये लाइन के ऊपर मतलब प्राइस इतना है, प्राइस इज पीडब्ल्यू, बट पीडब्ल्यू के ऊपर भी इतना सारा डिमांड है. इफ यू कैन सी ए, इफ यू कैन सी बी, इफ यू कैन सी सी डी ई, ये सब प्राइस लाइन के ऊपर है और डिमांड लाइन के नीचे है. दैट वुड मीन दिस इज ऑल कंज्यूमर सरप्लस. सो देयर आर two types of surplus. I'll just write CS for short form, consumer surplus. Then there will be producer surplus. Then there will be total surplus. Okay. So consumer surplus, I guess you can write this out in notes. I won't be able to write everything out here in this whiteboard. So consumer surplus before tariff is A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus X. All these things about the demand, below the demand curve and above the price line. मतलब price भले ही इतना है, but still demand is all this. So this is consumer surplus. Now moving on to producer surplus. What is producer expecting? So here look at the supply curve. In case of producer, look at the supply curve and look at this price
प्राइस के नीचे on supply curve के ऊपर, earlier what we saw is price के ऊपर and demand curve के नीचे. Here it's inverse for supply. For supply, see above the supply curve and below the price, we can see there is this G point. So this is the producer's surplus. कि प्राइस भले इतना है बट सप्लाई इसमें कम हो रहा है, प्रोड्यूसर के पास एक्स्ट्रा गुड्स है, he can produce more and more in that particular region. So that's why it is producer surplus. So total surplus is consumer plus CS plus PS, consumer plus producers. So it will be A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F plus G. All those sections which I'm on. This is before welfare. Again, mark my words. This is before welfare. So now we would just see after welfare. Yeah, after, sorry, not after welfare, after tariffs. Yeah, my bad. Yes. So after tariffs, सब कुछ चेंज हो गया, प्राइस चेंज, क्वांटिटी चेंज, डिमांड चेंज, सब कुछ चेंज हो गया, imports हो गए Q4 minus Q3. So now the consumer surplus, now we have a new line, we have this line. Okay, अभी ये line से same चीज तो हम लोग ने किया है, डिमांड कर्व अपना है उसके नीचे, वी आर करंटली लुकिंग एट CS, कंज्यूमर सरप्लस. कंज्यूमर सरप्लस मतलब डिमांड कर्व के नीचे एंड प्राइस के ऊपर क्या आया, सिर्फ A प्लस बी आया. ओके, कंज्यूमर सरप्लस सिर्फ A एंड B आया. नाउ मूविंग ऑन टू प्रोड्यूसर सरप्लस. तो प्रोड्यूसर सरप्लस सप्लाई कर्व के ऊपर, प्राइस के ऊपर, राइट, प्राइस के नीचे, सप्लाई कर्व के ऊपर, प्राइस के नीचे. तो वी जस्ट गॉट C एंड G. सप्लाई कर्व के ऊपर, you can see this curve, उसके ऊपर एंड प्राइस के नीचे. So we just got C and G. Earlier पहले सिर्फ G था. No doubt producer surplus has increased. पहले सिर्फ G था, now it has become C plus C, but consumer surplus has decreased a lot. And now what is happening is this E that we are looking at is the government revenue. So because of this quantity 4 and quantity 3 ka difference, price ka difference, this E part, it's not coming. See, we can see, not coming under domestic, not coming under supply, not coming under consumer surplus, not coming under producer surplus. E part, जो with the quantity that is differs इतना हुआ, so it is government surplus or government revenue, जो extra tariff add हुए. See, this is the difference. ये extra, let's say हर एक को 30,000 tariff add हो गया, right? 30,000, 80,000 का प्राइस था, अभी 1,10,000 का हो गया. तो 30,000 ऐड हुआ इधर, और इतना क्वांटिटी लोग स्टिल इतना क्वांटिटी अपन इंपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, right? Q4 minus Q3 was Q4 minus Q3 were imports and 30,000 increase. So see this square. This is not square, rectangle. मतलब 30,000 into, let's say 1 lakh unit import कर रहा है. So 30,000 into 1 lakh unit imported. This is the E represents government revenue. This is what government would earn after imposing tariffs. Now, total surplus. Total surplus, if we look at it, would be A plus B, मतलब consumer surplus plus producer surplus plus government surplus, right? Total surplus in this case. पहले government को कुछ नहीं मिलता था, there were no tariffs, right? So अभी government would also earn. So yes, A plus B plus C plus E plus G. यहाँ पे G था और C था. This is G and C were consumers. This G and C were producer surplus. A और B were consumer surplus, or E is government. So A, B, E, C, G. This is the total surplus. मतलब we have lost this D and we have lost this F. पहले यहाँ पे भी surplus था. This was a part of which surplus? This was a part of consumer surplus earlier. Demand कर्व के नीचे था, price के ऊपर था. But because now demand has shrinked down, supply has shrinked up, government is also earning. Because this we can term it as welfare loss. People have, okay, hold on. Yeah, okay. Welfare loss. Not sure why I'm not able to write loss. Yes. So E, D, and F is just loss that has been incurred because of this, because of the increase in tariffs. So government would have to pay. I just now close this white screen and I can keep sharing my own screen. So you can just pause that video again and just view it many times if you want.
This is the diagram that we just constructed right from scratch. So this will give you an idea on how to construct diagrams, how to understand it with ease. Like I mentioned, imports with tariff, imports without tariff, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is what we assumed that initially price सब जगह पे 80,000 है. Then India में 80,000 and import जो भी कर रहा है उसपे 1,10,000. Correct. This was before protection. Before protection imports थे Q2 minus Q1. After protection imports हो गए Q4 minus Q3. Imports कम हो गए. Welfare पहले था welfare A B C D E F सब कुछ. Now the welfare has reduced. So the total welfare losses T and government is earning revenue E because of this. Okay. Now, since there's only 1 minute left, I'll just try to wrap it up. This is just the last session. Some of the rules of WT, World Trade Organization, you might have heard World Trade Center and World Trade Organization. So your members, there is non-discrimination. अगर एक कंट्री को let's say 1,000 रुपए में प्रोडक्ट बेच रहे हो तो दूसरे को भी 1,000 रुपए में बेचो. नो कानून की यूएस को सस्ते में बेच रहा चाइना को महंगा बेच रहा. यू कांट डू दैट. रेसिप्रोसिटी. So if one nation benefits from tariff reduction, अगर रशिया ने इंडिया को सस्ते में क्रूड भेजा तो उसको बाकी कंट्रीज को भी सस्ते में बेचना चाहिए था. That was the rule which is broke. Prohibition of quotas. So do not apply quotas. Fair competition. साथ में fair compete करो. No, advantage. अभी हम लोग में जानबूझ के imposing more tariffs on foreign products and lesser on Indian goods. You cannot do that. Binding tariffs. Example, company cannot rate existing tariffs without negotiating it. यूएसए को पूछे बिना ऐसी टैरिफ्स बढ़ा दिया उनके प्रोडक्ट्स पे, ऐसे ही आईफोन पे कॉस्ट बढ़ा दिया. दिस वोंट हैपन. You have to talk with Apple, you have to talk with USA, saying that हम लोग tariffs इतना या इतना बढ़ा रहे हैं. So if the USA also wants to increase in retaliation, what it will do is India के agricultural goods पे, mangoes पे tariffs बढ़ा देंगे. So this are some of the rules of WTO. WTO can impose sanctions as well. WTO can reduce, it will reduce trade restrictions and